Hi guys! I'm going to teach you how to make a Whyagram here. It's a method for constructing syllogisms, and it's going to be the method that you're going to use on your second zoo. So, suppose you got a proposition and you need to make an argument for it. You can use a Whyagram. So, here we are. Suppose you wanted to prove something really simple. Tomatoes are fruits. Okay. Now, the first step to making a Whyagram is to put a division, train tracks, between the subject and the predicate of the proposition. So the subject is tomatoes and our fruits is the predicate. So put a division in between the subject and the predicate. Okay. Next thing to do is to draw tentacles coming off of the train tracks and an X at the end of the tentacles. None of this should make sense yet, but it will make sense over time. This is a drawing exercise. A Whyagram is a diagram that gives you a reason why you should believe the proposition. So you just need to do this drawing. Next step is to draw the tentacles, top and bottom. Okay. Third step is to write an X with a colon next to it in the corner of your page. Okay. And now X marks the spot for Winnie the Pooh. Think. So we have to think. Why should we believe that tomatoes are fruits? And of course, there's debate about this, and children don't understand why tomatoes are fruits because they taste terrible when you're little. But the main reason why is that tomatoes are the reproductive seed-bearing vehicles for plants. So we can say tomatoes are fruits because they bear seeds. So X then is going to be bears seeds. That's the reason why tomatoes are fruits. So we put bears seeds next to the X. Okay, that's the key. Okay. Now, the next thing that we do once we've got our main reason is we assemble the argument. And so we assemble the argument by reading the argument on the diagonal. So the first diagonal gives us the first premise. The second diagonal gives us the second premise. So there you are. Okay. So we're going to be reading down the two diagonals along the tentacles and the subject and the predicate. So this is what we're eventually going to do. I'm going to put the argument up here. The first premise, and we need to add a quantifier, which you're going to learn about in chapter 6, but we need to add the quantifier, which is a universal quantifier. We need to say whatever. So the first premise is going to go whatever bears seeds is a fruit. Second premise is tomatoes bear seeds. Okay. Therefore, tomatoes are fruits. Okay, so here's the argument. Okay, so I read it. This is crazy. Okay, so I read it on the diagonal. I put a whatever in front of the first premise, and so I say whatever X, which is bears seeds. So whatever bears seeds is a fruit, and so that's what the first premise says here. Whatever bears seeds is fruit. And then the second premise just starts from the tomatoes here and then goes down to the X. So tomatoes bear seeds. Okay, so that's what I wrote. Tomatoes bear seeds. Therefore, tomatoes are fruits. Okay, so that is a valid syllogism, giving you a reason why you should believe that tomatoes are fruits. So that is the Whyagram method. Okay. Now, let's do a slightly harder proposition. Okay. So let's do a moral argument. Let's do something like this. Murder is unjust. Murder is unjust. Okay, there we are. Okay, so suppose you wanted to prove this. Murder is unjust. Okay, So the first thing you do is you divide up subject and predicate. Okay. Then you do the tentacles up to the left, down and to the right. I put the X's on each side. And then I write X colon. Okay. There it is. And now I got to think. Why is it exactly that murder is unjust? Okay. I think the basic reason is that it harms an innocent person as a member of the common good. It also is contrary to the dignity of another to deprive that innocent other of his life. So we could either run a common good argument, that would be contrary to political justice, or we could run a human dignity argument, that would be contrary to commutative justice. I think I'll do the human dignity argument here. So my reason then is going to be that murder violates human dignity. Okay, so violates human dignity. Okay, there it is. There are multiple reasons, but this will be good enough for our argument. Okay, violates human dignity. All right, now we assemble our premises, reading them down on the diagonal. P1, P2. Okay, so we're going to start with P1. Remember, for P1, you have to put a whatever on it, the quantifier. And so we'll read that like this. P1 is whatever violates human dignity is unjust. Then P2, murder violates human dignity. Therefore, murder is unjust. Okay? Here we are. Okay? So the first premise, again, reading it from top left to bottom right, whatever X, which is violates human dignity, is unjust. That's the first premise here. Okay. Second premise is murder, then down to the right, violates human dignity. Murder does that, so murder is unjust. So this again gives you a valid syllogism. Now notice something. This argument here might not be too informative because we might say, well, wait a second. Why think that whatever violates human dignity is unjust? And maybe it has something to do with treating someone merely as a means and not as an end. Okay, so as a matter of fact, you could go back into that P1 there, divide up subject and predicate, and eventually make a new Whyagram for this premise. And so then you can have premises, sub-arguments as arguments for premises, and then premises as arguments for the final conclusion. So you can use this Whyagram method in an iterated way to generate arguments for premises and arguments for sub-premises and arguments for sub-sub-premises and on until you come to things that are known just by reason or that are based on observation or induction or things like that. So you can trace arguments back to the fundamental principles. Okay. It doesn't matter how long the proposition is that you're trying to prove, just so long as it is non-complex. That is to say, it has a subject and a predicate, and that's it. So no and, no or, no if, then. Just one subject and one predicate. So they can be very long sentences, but just so long as they have one subject and one predicate, you do the same thing. You break it up between the subject and the predicate, you make the X, and then you think, what's the reason why I should believe that murder is unjust? You encapsulate it in the X here, and then you basically read it off of the chart, making sure to put the whatever on the P1, and that's how you get your syllogism. Okay, so that's what the zoo exercise is asking you to do, to make Whygrams for each one of the propositions. Hopefully this explanation will be helpful. If you have any questions about it, you can ask me in class or send me an email. I found that students have found this to be a very useful method of constructing arguments. To be honest with you, I use this all throughout my dissertation and research for generating arguments. It stimulates the mind. That X there, like it sort of taunts me into coming up with the reason. As I see that X, I'm thinking, okay, what is the reason? And then boom, I can immediately construct an argument around that X, and I've got something to argue with. So I found it very, very useful. I hope you do too. Ask me questions if you got it. Hopefully the practice will be helpful for you, and you can use this throughout the whole rest of your life. I'm able to do it in my head now because I have the method basically memorized and I can imagine what's going on. So if you have an imaginative mind as well, the graphical method will hopefully be very useful to you. Okay? All right. Let me know if you got questions. Hope you enjoyed this. Take care. See you soon. Bye.